Making an Athlete.
Hi, I'm Ty Davis with Making an Athlete podcast.
Ultimately, you have to develop and improve, but the earlier you can get involved in a scene where there's exposure, the better.
Mike Plank, I appreciate you joining me today on the Making an Athlete podcast. First off, let's just start off who you are, what you do, and I know this is a podcast about sports, so let's talk about your sport history, where you started as a kid.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ty. I appreciate you having me. My name is Mike Plank. I'm from Stockton, California. My current role is recruiting coordinator for the men's basketball team at Washington State University. We just finished our first season, so just finishing that up, working through this summer and all the things happening now in society, and trying to figure out how to get back into the swing of things. We're actually going to try to report to campus next week, start getting our guys back on campus and try and get going with some summer workouts. And, the priority is just getting everybody back and safe and healthy and settled in, and then kind of working out from there. So we'll see how it shakes out, but excited to get back going.
That's awesome. So what are with everything going on right now, we're recording this podcast in an unusual time with COVID. That's kind of out of the or the past ordinary of what would be like for you guys getting your camp started, which would just be everything that we've known as normal. What is it different how you guys are approaching it this time? You talk about safety and everything that's going on. How's that function with doing a camp?
Yeah, so, the biggest thing is probably there's a 7-day quarantine on our campus for all our student athletes when they come back, if you're domestic, so if you're from the U.S. If you're from coming international, which we have quite a few guys that are, there's a 14-day quarantine, and then there's a COVID test, and then there's your physical. So before you can actually step in the facility and do anything physical, you got to get through all that. It's going to be 10 to 14 days for domestic guys and probably 18 to 20 for international guys. So a lot different than years past. Just, like I said, number one thing is just safety of our players, safety of our staff, all the people involved in athletics.
All right. Well, let's take a big step back and let's start with, how you got to where you are today, going back to the youth sport age. How did you get into basketball? And a big question to always ask on this podcast, in addition to that, is did you play any other sports as well, or was it always basketball? So tell me about your youth, playing sports as a kid.
Yeah, no, I saw the questions earlier and made me kind of think back a little bit. It all started actually with baseball, growing up in Stockton, California, just playing Little League baseball. It was the first sport I played. Dad was my coach, and for a few years, and just loved it. Loved playing, loved competing. And then I got into basketball probably right around fourth grade. I went to a school that played CYO basketball, and I loved that as well. And so played baseball up until I played like 3 years in high school. Obviously played basketball in high school, and then I played 1 year of Pop Warner football, and wasn't very good. I wore number 39. We were blue and orange, and I'd be the dude with like green like pajamas on underneath his uniform. So I wasn't very good. And then I decided to play in high school. Had some really good coaches, and actually ended up being the quarterback and getting recruited for football out of high school. Played a year of track, so essentially did 4 sports in high school.
Oh, wow.
Did 2 sports growing up consistently, 3 if you count football. And so, the process was for me getting into sports was just playing as a youth and having parents that got me involved. Probably the thing that got me into football the most was my mom was a high school teacher at Franklin High School in Stockton, and they had some really, really good football teams, back in the the early 90s and the late 90s. They actually, I think, hold the longest losing streak in the state of California also. But they turn it around. They got a good coach and some really good players. And I was able to I was a ball boy on that team. So I got to like ride the bus with those guys to away games. I was on the field during home games, and I was there. I was a part of the team. And, you know, thinking back to your question, there's no chance I have the path I have unless I have that experience of my mom allowing me and having me be a part of a team. I was probably in like, you know, 5th, 6th grade at the time, and I was a ball boy, and I mean, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, what an experience for a 5th or 6th grade. I mean, you get to be with all the, you know, at that time, like the high schoolers are the big guys. They're like, everything's fast paced, and it leaves an impact on you. Just in like, this is amazing. Like, I want to be part of this.
Yeah, I mean, there were some NBA guys or NFL guys on the team, and I mean, it was just they were really. I mean, they went 10-0, and then got dinged for illegal recruiting and weren't allowed to go to the playoffs. And it was a whole deal. And it was really unfortunate because, you know, there was a good chance they would have been state champions. And in the state of California, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
So that was an awesome experience, and really kind of doing that in football and basketball as a ball boy really made me – I saw, you know, the guys were cool. You know, they were tough. And seeing that, like, really made me want to strive to be a high school athlete and kind of be one of those guys.
Yeah. So you're a high school athlete. You're playing all these sports. How do you decide, you know, basketball's a route that I want to go? Is it – I mean, I'll let you answer this before I try to put, you know, words in your mouth.
I just always loved hoop, man. Hoop was probably the most accessible for me. I was fortunate enough to have a natural hoop at my house that my dad put in. There was an elementary school around the corner. So in terms of like accessibility, I didn't need anybody else. I didn't need, you know, a teammate or a team or a pitcher or somebody else to catch the football. I could just go hoop on my own, and the neighborhood kids and my friends, that's what we'd go do. And I'd go do it on my own or sit outside. So basketball ended up kind of being the favorite as I grew up.
All right. And did you say earlier that you were getting recruited for football?
Yeah, so I ended up getting recruited to college for football. I was a quarterback, and, you know, we had a good team, went to the playoffs, won a couple games, had, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 Division I guys. And, you know, we were getting recruited. I was getting recruited, receiver, running back, lineman. We had some guys getting recruited, and that's where most of my recruitment came from. Stockton's not really known for basketball as much as football. And, again, growing up and watching all these guys, you know, we had guys going to SC, guys going to Cal. Pete Carroll's coming to the high school to see these guys. I mean, it was a deal. And as an outsider looking in, I was like, wow, I want to be a part of that. So because of the tradition of our high school, we had big schools coming in, and they'd come in to look at myself and other guys. And, you know, we'd have Cal. You know, we'd have Utah. SC would come. San Diego State, some big programs would come in. Fresno State was really good. And so in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to like one of these spots that these past guys went to. I'm leading the area in passing, touchdowns, yards. We have a good team. I'm thinking this is it. And then a guy by the name of Mark Speckman, who's now actually the offensive coordinator at UC Davis, was the head coach at Willamette University. And one of the D1 guys that had came mentioned to him, there's a couple guys you need to check out. And so he came to the school to talk to me. And I remember the security guard came up to get me and said, hey, yeah, there's a coach from Willamette. And I was like, what is that? And what division are they? And he was like, it's Division III. I said, there's no chance. I'm not doing it. Like, you know, all I knew was D1. All we knew was D1. My mom worked at the school, and she actually had a radio, and she got on the radio and said some choice words about me getting down to that office right now. So kind of a funny story. It was me and my running back, Tim Brown. He ended up going to Temple in the Big East at the time.
Yeah.
We get down to the office, and Coach Speckman's waiting in the office with our principal and my mom, and one of the coaches is in there. And I don't know if you know who Mark Speckman is, but he was born without hands.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Kind of got nubs, and he's he's an All-American linebacker at Azusa Pacific, motivational speaker, good, really good player, and a really good coach in person. And so I thought, okay, this is a joke. Division III, there's a guy in here with no hands that's trying to recruit me for football. I didn't think it was real, and he ended up talking, and it appealed to me, but it really appealed to my mom. And game, set, match.
We'll talk about that a little bit. I mean, you're at that age, and if you can remember back, like obviously, like we have a combo of listeners, someone that's that young athlete coming through, and then you have a lot of parents on here trying to understand that process. And there's a balance of, what a 17 or 18-year-old is trying to make a life decision while having that guidance of a parent. What was that process like with your mom when you had this conversation, and how did she approach that with you?
Yeah, that's a good question. She had been a small part of some of the other guys that have gone through Franklin's journey to college. So she already had like a base knowledge, which I would say by and large most parents don't. And it makes things really difficult to kind of understand and comprehend because everybody has opinions and not everybody knows. So it can be challenging to navigate. So I was fortunate that she had that base knowledge. But more so, we kind of being affiliated at a high school that had sent guys to college before and had a reputation was a huge advantage over if I went to, you've been in Stockton. If I went to a Stag or even an Edison, our rival, I probably shouldn't use them, but I will. It's a huge advantage because coaches know about it and they come through. So there's already a platform of understanding of, okay, this program puts out college players. And so I always tell parents when they ask, and football and basketball are a little bit different. We can talk about basketball as well, but if you want to be recruited, if you want to take a step towards being recruited, you have to either be around Division I players or Division I coaches or Division II players or Division II coaches or Division III players, Division III coaches on a somewhat regular basis, and or people who are connected, really connected to those coaches, because a lot of people, kind of think they are or say they are, and maybe that's not always the case, but somebody that's respected. And so that's probably the best piece of advice I got is just be around, other players of that caliber, because if you're around that level of players, there's going to be coaches coming through. And if there's coaches coming through, there's opportunities to be seen like I was. I was seen by a Division I coach who called a Division III coach and said, hey, you might want to check this guy out. And that's how it happened. More so for my teammates. It wasn't necessary for me, but they're coming in to see my teammates. They see the film, and, there's a connection there.
I mean, and I'd second that too, because, the thing that happened for me is I was, I grew up in Marysville, California, not a lot of athletes or even college-worthy athletes come out of that town. And it was the last game of the season for baseball that an Orioles scout was there watching somebody else. And the guy who he was watching was a phenomenal player. And last game of my high school career, I had decided to go at that time on a very, very, very small scholarship to a school in Oklahoma, an NAIA school. And he came up, and as I'm getting my car, said, hey, I want to talk to you. I saw you in the outfield, and I saw your arm out there. I think you should be a pitcher. And I told him what my plan was, and he said, I want you to consider California JUCOs. California JUCO baseball is a very high level. And then ultimately that changed, my path, and I went to JUCO, and, rest is history. But point being is, like you said, is like he was there to see somebody else. Wasn't
Yeah.
there to see me, but he came by and he said, "Hey, I see, projection and you," which, man, I'll always admit in high school I was as average as it gets. I was 17-year-old graduate. It was that JUCO that, I jumped up 3 inches and gained 30 pounds, and then I gained velo on my fastball, and he saw that, but it all rooted because he was there to watch a dude throwing 95.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that you hit it spot on, with what you're saying there. And back to what, the question and what you're talking about here. So you, your mom's in there, she's helping you, make that decision. She has that base knowledge. Was it kind of that was it? You had that meeting and she's like, this is where you're going, or was there any more debate after that?
You know what? She actually gave me a choice, and the choice was you either get majority of your school paid for or you're going to the military. So at that time, there was other schools talking, but, St. Mary's had came in and they were serious, but it just ended up being a situation where, the Division III model, works. There's no athletic scholarships. It's all need-based, and it's all merit-based. And so I was in the International Baccalaureate program, which is, like AP essentially at a lot of schools, and decent grades, and applied. And I ended up getting quite a bit of money to go to school there because of my grades and because of my need.
Okay.
And so it was pretty close to a full ride. Awesome. And so really, really fortunate for that. But when it came down to it, the conversation was, okay, you have this option or you have the Marines. I mean, I went and took the test to do it. I was talking to a recruiter. She was dropping me off at the office. And this is right around the time we were entering a country called Iraq. And I really like sports and obviously really respect men and women who serve in the military, but that wasn't really the path that I saw for myself.
Right.
And, I would have done it if I needed to, for sure. But I definitely loved athletics and sports and saw that as a way for me to get to college.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, as an athlete and in high school, and you have the opportunity to continue playing, that's a cool thing just to have that choice. Obviously, like you said, military, great choice as well, but to keep playing sports and do something you're passionate about, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And going, just because you brought up, and this is a good conversation to have here, is we've heard from some D2 and D1 coaches on this podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about that D3 aspect that you just talked about, which is merit and need-based scholarship, because a lot of times there's, even if it's D1, the understanding of how many scholarships are available depending on the sport, how that gets divvied up. What I had gotten a full ride in baseball my junior year, which was extraordinary. But the deal that we made was that my senior year I would be academic based, which equated to 30%. And so it's that understanding of, in D3 there's not athletic scholarships available, but that doesn't mean you won't get school paid for. So if you want to talk a little bit, I know you kind of mentioned it, but if there's any more details around what someone can expect when they're approached by a D3.
Yeah, a couple things with the D3 model. One, there is, I know the numbers, but there is way more Division IIIs than any other division in college athletics, which means there's more opportunities there. And I turned my nose up at it for sure because I didn't know it. I didn't understand it. But once I, did my research and experienced it, I mean, a lot of times they're smaller colleges. A lot of times they're good academic schools. And a lot of times it's a really, really good option for majority of student athletes. I mean, such a small percentage that can play at the level I'm at now, and even the Division I level and the Division II level. And so, I would encourage people to look at that model of Division III for sure, because it's an opportunity to play, and it's it's an opportunity where you can leave a Division III with a very good degree and very good relationships. and they're probably going to be a little bit more meaningful, I would even say, than like a school like Washington State, where we have 500 people in some classes. The classes at Division III, I mean, there's classes of 12 up to 30 maybe at the most. So the way it works is obviously the need-based money is based off of your what your family has or what they make in terms of assets. The FAFSA, which you fill out, spits you out a number called your EFC, your expected family contribution, and that number goes into what the school costs. So if your expected family contribution is $20,000 and the school costs $40,000, then you have a need of $20,000 and you're expected to pay your expected family contribution of $20,000, which is, tough for some people. Some are prepared, some aren't prepared. There's always the option of taking out a student loan to cover that amount also. My wife did that. She went to USF, University of San Francisco, on to nursing school, and she took out 100% of loans to be a nurse. And so that's always an option. The other part of it is, so you have the expected family contribution and then the need. The other part of it that can cushion that expected family contribution a little bit is merit-based. So based on your GPA and based on your test score, you could be eligible for a certain amount of money. I had probably about a 3.6-ish in high school and a little over 1,000 on the SAT. That qualified me for about $11,000 in merit-based money. Okay.
And just so for all the people listening now, SAT when me and you were taking it was a little bit different than the scores now. Because I think if you say our scores now, I think that's higher. And, I forget. I probably should research the new scale. But when you're saying that, as a side note, different scale for us.
2-part math and verbal is what you're going to look at, even on the 3-part now. I think it may have gone back to 2-part, but it changed. So, 2-part math and verbal, 1,000, just okay. I took it 3 times. Okay. I didn't get that score to start. I had to prepare and work up to that. But, my final score ended up being, a little bit over 1,000, which was decent.
Yeah, that's good.
So that was able to get me some more money, which lowered kind of what would be expected to pay out of pocket. And, Willamette was very generous to me and my family, and they figure out a way to make it work to where most of it was covered. Now that's probably not going to be the case for everybody. Right. You probably are going to have to pay something out of pocket, but I would. At most Division III schools, I would almost say there's going to be a high return on investment, whatever it is, because of small class sizes, because of the opportunity to really, really play. I had an opportunity to really play. Had I gone to, another school, Division I, Division II, who knows? Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
And the opportunity was great.
And that's the point you just said is not a debate, but it's a conversation piece. We have a lot of time with a lot of the coaches on here and or previous athletes. It's like, okay, you have those choices of, a D1, D2, D3, or even on one of the most recent podcasts, it was talking down to the scale of conference. They had the choice of Division I, but it was like, okay, which conference is the higher competition conference, and where do I have an opportunity to play? And that's not saying, hey, you're not going in there and saying like, I'm going to work hard to like be the best of all the best. Like, yeah, do that if you think that you have that, but it's also, you don't want to commit somewhere and you're on the team, but you don't play for 4 years. Yeah. You're going to play a sport and academics, but you want to pick the best opportunity for you to enjoy that actual playing time. And you do not know that right away when you go into school. I mean, that's why a lot of people transfer.
No, often. I was in that boat. I wanted to, even at Division III. So, just to put in perspective how hard it is, it's, I'm in high school and being recruited football Division I's, Pac-12, Mountain West, you name it, ends up going to a Division III. And, I'm the third string quarterback. There's 6, and I end up being the third string quarterback, which isn't a lot of playing time, and ultimately redshirting. And I mean, you talk about like bursting your bubble. It was hard, and that's just how hard it is. And Division III is really good. Division II is really good, and obviously Division I is the highest level. But I wanted to transfer. I thought, man, I should be playing. This is crap. And when you're in that culture of not playing, and you're there, and you've always played in high school,
Right.
all-league quarterback at a Division I high school with a lot of kids and a big division. Kind of hurts your ego a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, my mom, kind of my anchor with all this. I kind of told her, hey, I may want to go try something else. And she said, okay, you have my full support. If you want to go try something else, just don't ask me for anything. And I was like, maybe I'll stay and work it out. And ended up being, the best decision of my life. Division III offered the opportunity to play multiple sports for me. 5 years of football because I redshirted, 4 years of basketball, and ended up playing a year of baseball. Again, just sticking it out with every sport and being on the teams was priceless.
You just said something that most college athletes don't do. You played 3 college sports.
Yeah.
And that's, let alone 2, you rarely see. So that's amazing. That's a very active school year.
Yeah.
So that would be a dream of mine. I have no talent whatsoever to get, basketball or football. That's why, people like, Sam, who Sam Gay, who you and I know mutually, I always got made fun of for how passionate I was about intramural sports in grad school, because it was like living out that dream of, I know
hooping.
Yeah. I played 4 years of basketball in high school, and, to this day, I love baseball, but basketball, it was that hype, getting ready for that game. We may have been 4-20, but still felt like I was, we were going to win each game.
Yeah.
If you ask my mom, she would tell you, she loved watching me play baseball, but she enjoyed watching me play basketball more. But digressing there, what I want to go back and ask you, you talk about this, and it's something for, athletes going into college, not only just going to college, but people that also transfer. But it's the red shirt you talked about. I redshirted. We've talked to a few people on the podcast who've redshirted. I want you to kind of talk about that if you can. And, the red shirt word at first is scary for people because they're like, oh, I'm not good enough for the team.
Yeah.
And, it's hard for a young athlete initially, but when I look back, best decision I ever made. It allowed me to grow. What was it like for you?
Yeah. So, football wise, there was a senior quarterback and a sophomore quarterback, both very good, both better than me, both more mature, both physically more ready, both had a better grasp on the offense. And you don't see all those things back then because, in my head, I can make every throw. I'm throwing it a mile. I'm putting it on the money. I'm good too, right?
Right.
But that doesn't always equate to playing time, And so being in the third quarterback role, I had to run the scout team and do those things and really put in perspective. I had to learn some things, and that was tough. And so the option came, well, you're probably not going to play unless there's an injury. Maybe we'll just redshirt you, and that'll give you an opportunity to come back for a 5th year and play. And in your head, when you're young and naive, you think like, I'll probably be in the NFL by then. But if that's what you guys are thinking, then let me talk to my agent. My mom, my agent was one of my 5 brothers probably at the time. I don't know who I was leaning on, but you think, okay, well, that works. So, it's kind of a hard decision because you do equate it with not being good enough or not being ready, and sometimes that is the case. Physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it may be, sometimes it is the case. Other times it's just opportunity based. There's guys ahead of you that are going to get the nod, and by and large, older, more experienced guys are always going to get the opportunity ahead of you. And as a coach now, that's what I'm doing 10 out of 10 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the freshman or the young guy comes and gets the opportunity, he comes and gets the opportunity. But first dibs is going to the senior who's been in the program and the sophomore who's been in the program. That's how you develop good programs that sustain winning for years on years on years. And that's, as a coach now, that's what I want to be a part of.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, you put in your time, it's in, in the work world and everything, someone, you get a job and you're just new to that job, and there's someone that's been there 3 or 4 years, like they know their way around. Now, yeah, you have your time to prove, like you can accelerate quickly, but they're not going to say, hey, like, you're the guy now. And
Right.
this guy's been here 5 years. So he worked, he worked his or he or her worked their way up. Talking about coaching, let's we'll kind of transition into you now as a coach, from all that player experience, a little bit of your history of coaching. You were at San Francisco City College, and then were you at USF, or you went from City straight to Washington State?
Yeah, so working backwards, Washington State, we just finished our first year. Was at San Francisco City last year with Justin LeBall and a very good junior college basketball program. Prior to that, I was EYBL coach on the Nike EYBL circuit.
What's EYBL stand for?
It's Elite Youth Basketball League, so it's like Nike Travel AAU circuit. I was a head coach of the 17U.
Where was that based out of?
Portland team. So Nike puts it on, but what it is it's I don't know how many teams they have now, but there's a select number of elite teams around the country. So between the U.S. and Canada, and a lot of times it's geared around bigger cities, Houston, Portland, L.A., anywhere where there's really good players. And when I say really good players, just about every team we played against, including my own, probably had an NBA player.
Oh, wow.
Or two on the team. But these guys, again, are freshman, sophomore, junior, seniors to be in high school at the time.
And how are those players being selected or getting that exposure to be on these teams? How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of times it's a tryout. These AAU teams do tryouts. It's not terribly hard to spot an NBA player as a junior. A lot of times they're bigger, stronger, faster than everybody else. The keen eye can really pick out kind of the diamond in the rough, guys that have potential that can get there. And so ultimately these teams are put together, and there's a 16-game I think it's a 14-game schedule, and then there's a tournament at the end that you're trying to get to called Peach Jam, which is basically like the NCAA tournament. You're seeded, and then you play, and the ultimate goal is to win the Peach Jam championship, which is an elite thing to do.
Okay. Where do they have that at? Is that in Portland or
Augusta, Georgia?
Augusta, Georgia. Okay.
And they call it the Peach Jam every year.
Makes sense now.
Pretty cool opportunity.
That's awesome. So you've coached there. What else? I kind of interrupted you on your path, but
yeah, no, I was able to spend some time, in Milwaukee on the Bucks training camp staff and free agent staff. I had coached a kid whose dad was a assistant in the organization, and he opened the door for me to get in there with Jay Kidd and them. I had a little bit of experience with USA Basketball and working with their World Cup team. And then before that, I was at Portland State as an assistant for 2 years. Okay. Before that, I was at Casper College in Wyoming, which is a national junior college, for a year. Before that, San Francisco with Rex Walters as a graduate manager. And then before that, I was at Willamette University as an assistant for a few years, which is my alma mater, Division III school.
Okay, and that leads me to a big question I've had is we've talked a lot about the football recruiting process, and you go into Willamette for football, and now we're here. You're a basketball coach. We should touch on what happened in that transition period. I know you said you played you were playing football, basketball, and a little bit of baseball at Willamette. What made you, want to go the basketball coach route as opposed to football, which you were originally recruited for?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know what? I coached football right after I played for a year at my alma mater as well, and I coached basketball. And it kind of honestly came down to the basketball coach at Willamette. Basketball was always my favorite, right? Always the most passionate about that. But the basketball coach at Willamette presented a little bit better of an opportunity in terms of like coaching and responsibility and just a path for me to be really, really involved, which is ultimately, I think, everybody's goal.
Right.
So I did that for a few years, and then, my boss at the time, a guy by the name of Kip Ione, he sent me to a couple development things around the country where I was involved with some high-level coaches, coaches at Michigan State, Alabama, Texas, Baylor, Cal, things like that. And being around these guys, again, being in the room and being around the level of coach and the level of player you want to be, very important. I was around these coaches, and I thought to myself, like, A, I can do that. I can get there. B, like, hearing what these guys do, how they do it, and their path, that's something I think I really, really enjoy. So I took the step of looking for opportunities, and I did like a little tour where I paid money out of my own pocket to go to Texas, to go to Baylor, to go to Alabama, go to Michigan State. And, I took guys up that said, hey, if you ever need anything, call me. Like, I took them up on that. Not a lot of people do. And so I called them, say, hey, I'm in town. Don't want to take too much time, but maybe we can do lunch or something. And I did that at all those places, and that just gave me more confidence and more connections to the industry to say, hey, I can do this. And ultimately landed at San Francisco with Rex Walters, ex-NBA player, who gave me an opportunity to come in and work for free and just learn. And I had a basketball in one hand, a towel on the other, and you wouldn't find anybody in the country faster than me getting to that sweat when a guy fell to get that sweat. So took a lot of pride in the opportunity, and ultimately it's really paid off.
I mean, that story, that is like your grassroots, like really you going out and doing that is I think a big piece that, aside from, no, actually it is applicable to even like young athletes that are trying to get recruited. For you, I think what you said is a great thing for like someone that's just graduating college and understanding like it takes work to, like, you got to set up the meetings, you got to network. It's just not going to happen. It's not someone's going to walk, you walk off that stage and someone's not holding a job offer for you and saying like, hey, you're the guy. Like, you're not getting recruited technically a lot of times. Like, you get recruited for an athlete. Now, I know some people, there are headhunters out there for companies, but
right.
What you're saying, like, even as an athlete going through, it's about exposure. It's about reaching out to people and not expecting anything of it, just trying to make that connection. And then from that connection, you build out all these other ones. And then, you're a story right here in front of us, or hearing on the podcast of how hard work turns out to, now at Washington State. And it's just going to continue for you. So, that all rooted, you've chosen your basketball route. You're now at Washington State in your second year, obviously a very different second year with everything that's going on, with COVID somewhat ending your first NCAA year at Washington State abruptly. I think you had told me earlier before we started this, Washington State actually played the very last game of the whole NCAA season once they shut everything down because of COVID.
Yeah, we're national champions. That's correct.
National champions, exactly, with a win over Colorado.
Right.
So now, as a coach at Washington State, as a recruiting coordinator, let's kind of talk a little bit about that process of, what is the recruiting process for basketball, and how, at what age do you start the recruiting process, and then how over the course really of a person's high school years does it come to initial offer, or letters, and then that initial offer, like, hey, you're the one that we want?
Yeah. There's levels to kind of your question, right? In terms of, first and foremost, like, you have to be good enough, right? Like, that's the priority, is being good enough. And if you're good enough, majority of the time, somebody's going to find you. And obviously you get good enough by preparing yourself, really working on your game, expanding and improving over time. So in terms of like recruiting for us, we really, really would like to focus regionally, right? Like, we want to bring the best players from the Northwest, to Washington State. So that being said, if you're a kid in Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Spokane, Eugene, Salem, whatever it may be, like, we want to recruit you. Like, we want you to be and work and be good enough to play at the Pac-12 level, and be a student athlete at Washington State. We're international with our recruiting. Our priority obviously would be to do it regionally, but I think we have 6 guys from other countries on our team right now. And again, we're using relationships. We'll find guys. There's different platforms. There's scouting services that we subscribe to. I think we subscribe to probably over 20 scouting services, and a lot of times those are regional. So you got a guy in Arizona that does write-ups on the best players there, usually even sometimes all the players there, and he'll rate them, right? So he thinks you're a high major player. He thinks you're a mid-major plus player. So the earlier you can get involved, the better, because a lot of times you can develop some hype, if you will, and that can carry you on through high school as a kid that's pretty good. Ultimately, you have to develop and improve. But the earlier you can get involved in a scene where there's exposure, the better, because, we're leaning on scouts. We're obviously leaning on our eyes and relationships as well. But again, in order to be seen by us or in the mix with us, like, you have to be in touch with a relationship of ours that we know and trust. There's a lot of other relationships that we know that we might not trust in terms of players. And I only say that to say that, they might not have, overselling. They might be somebody that oversells guys. Yeah, you got to take a look at this kid. Those guys kind of get X'd out of the equation quickly, because we get thousands of kids that we look at. I mean, I get probably 25, 50 emails a day from kids and from coaches that we have to sift through. And I try really, really hard to get back to everybody and just say, hey, yes, this looks like something that may be of interest, or no, we're not recruiting Bulgaria at the moment, whatever it may be, or, maybe look at these options.
Coaches and athletes are emailing you, what on your end, what's that best approach when someone's emailing you? Like, and honestly, a lot of us have dreamed, as a young athlete, you have these big name schools and that you hope, I always wanted to play at Stanford, but, what is for you the best thing that gets your attention? And you have, like you said, you have only so much time during the day and so many inquiries coming in. What gets your eye, and what are important factors of someone that's reaching out?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be connected to somebody. You talk about the EYBL teams. Guys that are connected to the EYBL teams and the Adidas and the Under Armour teams and things like that, and have played on that circuit where the best competition is, they ultimately pop out. So if the head coach of the EYBL team calls me and says, hey, I got this kid you might want to look at, like, I'm all ears, because by and large, those guys that have made that team, that are good enough to be on that team, are good enough to play in the Pac-12. Mm-hmm. There's charts and graphs all over about how many EYBL, Adidas, Under Armour alums are at the Pac-12 level, or the high major level, or the Division I level. So again, getting into one of those relationships, and it's a little watered down. AAU is a little watered down because there's a million teams.
Right.
Everybody's connected in some sort of fashion. But just finding those trusted relationships of, guys that we trust and programs that we trust and that we know about. We'll find guys that aren't connected in those circles also, but probably the path of least resistance is being associated with, a good high school program, a good AAU program. And not everybody has those opportunities. A lot of times the top high school programs can be private schools, and I couldn't afford a private school in high school. I wanted to go to one. I wanted to go to St. Mary's. My mom went to St. Mary's, but, we couldn't afford it. So I went to Franklin, very public school, and, had to find my own path there, and luckily had enough help and support to do that. So really just taking chances. And if you're in high school, middle school, whatever it may be, just no excuses, finding ways to get to Washington State's elite camp, finding ways to get on campus and work your way into the coach's office and introduce yourself and have some film ready, like doing crazy things like that. Like essentially I did in coaching. Like I had no business being in Rick Barnes' office at Texas or being in Izzo's house at Michigan State because he's got a coaching party going on. But I kind of like forced my way in there.
Right.
I was invited. I didn't break in. And your listeners, but I kind of like, hey, yeah, I'm coming. And, you don't want to wear out your welcome too much, but just be cordial enough to kind of create your own path by not being fearful of putting yourself out there.
So creating the path, and there's two things I actually want to ask you about what you've talked about. One, since it's what you just talked about, you talked about like, okay, getting to an elite camp at Washington State. A question I have for a lot of times for coaches and people, it's, we have all these choices as youth athletes or parents to go to camps, to go to, tournaments that are supposed to be in front of scouts, and it's trying to find what the right one is. Is this a camp that's actually going to give me visibility, or is this just a summer camp that's to improve some skills, but there's no really recruiting going on. It's just, something that's offered. So you say get to an elite Washington State camp. How does someone get to an elite Washington State camp? Are they invited, or can you just go?
Yeah, we invite people, but naturally it's opened up to everybody. I think it has to be opened up to everybody in order to host it. And so, we invite our, 100 plus guys that we want to see. A lot of times it's younger guys. And then we have a handful of people that, again, they're trying to bust the door down and make their way there. Finding what camps have value and what don't. Again, it's almost always going to be beneficial to find and have a trusted relationship with somebody who knows this information, right? A lot of people claim to, not everybody does, but somebody who really does. And a lot of times you can look at their history of, they've helped players and things of that nature. But finding somebody who knows that, hey, what level do you think I can play at? Do you think I can be a Division II player, Division III player? And there's some organizations that won't tell you, but they'll just ask mom to keep paying money, and you might not be a college player of any sorts. You might be a Division II player, and they may be selling the Division I dream. Unfortunately, those things really happen. So just finding a small trusted circle of people who can say, hey, does it make sense for me to go to Washington State camp? Or even emailing a coach, here's my film. A lot of people won't get back to you, and that's just a reality. We get flooded with emails. I try really hard to get back to everybody in some fashion or another. Coach, here's my email, here's my tape. Like, do I have a chance to play at Washington State? And, I try to be as honest as possible, dream big and bust doors down and create opportunities. But at the same time, like, I don't want to waste anybody's time and or money or resources saying, yeah, come on up. And, mom's got to scramble to get some money to get them there. That's not fair and or okay. And I would want the truth if I was a
Right. And even if, you're giving that response to someone like, hey, you're not the right fit right now, let's say they're a high school athlete, that doesn't mean you can't find your way back to a Pac-12 or Washington State. There's other opportunities in JUCO, like maybe you just sprout, I'm a big Niner fan, and you have Ayuk, who they just drafted in the first round, and he was the Sierra College guy. He didn't go to he didn't go to ASU,
Right.
right out of high school. He went to JUCO.
Yeah.
If I don't know any about this, but if he had sent his film as a senior in high school, and they're like, hey, not right now, but in 2 years you develop.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the honesty part will save a lot of getting let down, or being led to think that there's something there, but it's just a money grab. One other thing I want to ask is going back to high school AAU. You talked about both of those. What is the weight, if there is any kind of weight, placed on AAU versus high school, and recruiting with those two different places?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. You have your high schools that are always going to stick out, right? Your Bishop Gormans, your Mater Days, your Bishop O'Dowds, Oakland, your Jesuits in Sacramento, your Grants. There's some programs that are going to stick out and almost always have a couple Division I players, that we're going to lean on. What AAU does is usually the better AAU teams traditionally have the better players. So when it comes time for us to go out and watch, we're going to, again, the EYBL events, or the events that have, the shoe brand teams, because a lot of times, not always, they have the best players. There's some other programs that aren't affiliated with shoe brands that have really good players too, and we'll go out and watch them. So just trying to filter it as best as possible. And not everybody can make the best teams. Not everybody can make the EYBL teams. That doesn't mean you're not good enough. Those teams miss on student athletes and players all the time that, go play for a no-name team and they're a high major player. Like, it happens all the time. We have guys on our team currently that were in that situation. In a sense, that's kind of what we're looking for, because you're under the radar and you're kind of, you're not being seen as much by the other schools in our league and the other schools at the Power 5 level. So, just being seen, the AAU creates a platform where coaches go in and watch, and we watch a lot of games, and we watch players. Again, if you can make it on a team with a Division I player or two that for sure, get on that team, because you're going to get seen, kind of like you and I got seen.
Right.
And again, they may not be there for you, but there has been occasions where I've been watching someone else and see somebody else and like them for us, sometimes better, or like them for another coach at another program that I have a relationship with. So that happens.
Division I basketball, how many scholarships are available? How many guys are on the roster?
Yeah, so 13 is the allotted number that all Division I programs get scholarship-wise.
Now, do those have to be full ride for each person, or can you? It's not divvied up. So baseball is 11.7, divvied amongst 30 guys.
Yeah,
if they want.
Division I is 13, and excuse me, at every Division I. I know at Division II, it's different every place. Some are fully funded. You take a spot like Western Oregon. I think they had like 6 scholarships that they split up amongst their guys, and they factor in academic aid, FAFSA money, and things of that nature. So you can get to close to a full ride at some of those spots. So 13 scholarship spots, and then we usually have between 2 and 4 walk-on spots, which means they're paying for school. They're not on scholarship.
So walk-ons. Let's talk about walk-ons. How can I be a walk-on if I'm not offered a scholarship, but I still get the opportunity to be a walk-on at a Division I school? The little thing that I'll give from my example is the only thing that I understand. I'm a big Kansas Jayhawk fan for no good reason. Just as a kid, I chose them.
Yeah.
They were good at basketball. And when I was a JUCO transfer, I applied to a few schools in case, baseball, I didn't get a scholarship for some reason. And I applied to Kansas. I got in, emailed the coach, surprisingly got an answer from them. I think I probably did send some film of myself. And they said, hey, we don't have any scholarship opportunities, but you can be a walk-on.
Yeah.
I ended up getting a nice scholarship to a Division I school, so that didn't happen. What's the process like for your walk-ons, which I feel may be slightly different than baseball, where you have a lot more guys on the roster?
Yeah, a lot of times with walk-ons, we prefer to have walk-ons from the state, from in-state. Guys that our walk-ons come with a lot of responsibility. You're going to be a scout team player, so you're essentially going to emulate what the guy from Oregon and Oregon State is going to do during that week of preparation. You have to do a high-level job of that. They're tough positions because majority of the time there isn't any playing time associated with them or an opportunity to play, and that's usually made clear at the beginning. Like, as a walk-on, your job is to help us in practice, to be kind of a leader off the court, to be a leader in the classroom, and just to be a good teammate that contributes to the team in a practice and preparation type role. That being said, we travel 2 walk-ons with us as part of kind of their repayment for doing the dirty work and doing kind of the jobs that they do. Without getting a lot of praise, we try and take a couple on the road with us when we travel and go on road trips. And they get to be a part of that and be a part of, the road trip experience, which is really fun.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. And I mean, are these walk-ons, are they already just coming to the school to attend it? And then they have like some basketball talent that they had in high school, and they come to you guys and say, hey, can I be part of the scout team? Or are they actively trying to gain a spot on the roster?
Yeah, it works both ways. I mean, when things, our plan this year was do an open tryout because, again, we probably have 50 to 100 current students who are interested in being walk-ons. And again, that role is not for everybody because it's a role where you have to swallow your pride and you're essentially coming in to do grunt work. You don't get a lot of praise for it, and you really can't have an expectation of like being the starting point guard,
right?
Because again, dream big and you want to put in full effort, but sometimes that can mess up your approach day to day if you're thinking, I'm going to beat out 4 scholarship guys. That being said, we have this past year we had a walk-on earn a scholarship. He was a Division I transfer walk-on, so he was kind of already a leg above. But there's situations where it's set up ahead of time where, hey, so-and-so is going to come. He's going to walk on. Was a good high school player. We're aware of him. Probably not a Pac-12 player, but can come help the team out. And then most schools will give you an opportunity and do a walk-on tryout where you can try out amongst a bunch of guys and try and compete for 1 or 2 spots.
Okay. Wow. That's a pretty cool little opportunity. I mean,
yeah, you never know what it can turn into.
Yeah,
it's cool if your mind's right and you're focused on the task and the actual role and doing a good job in that role. You never know what can happen. You see walk-ons get scholarships all the time.
I say you always see those videos on like social media, like the guy getting the surprise scholarship and stuff, and it obviously worked out. They put their hard work in and they earned it.
Yeah.
Well, coming into like the end of this podcast, I guess this is an open-ended question for you. If there's anything that I didn't talk about, just always want to ask, what advice or anything you could offer that young athlete that's looking for those aspirations to become a college basketball player. What advice do you have for them? Yeah,
obviously, working very, very hard and being good enough is almost certainly the number one thing you need to do, right? In order to get an opportunity, you kind of have to be prepared for an opportunity. And then finding those relationships that you can lean on for help, because it takes help. There's a lot of people out there that will help you and let it be known what you're trying to do. It's the same thing in any industry, really. Like, it's hard for people and the resources around you to assist you if they don't know exactly what your goal is and where you're trying to get to. And then again, taking chances, going to camps, working, mowing lawns, finding ways to get money, to get to places to go visit unofficially. And, if it's emailing the video coordinator or one of those guys on the support staff and say, hey, I want to come by, see the facility. And again, you'll get turned down a lot and not responded to, but just really, really pushing through and trying to track down that right opportunity and those right resources to assist you. And then again, I keep saying it, but the more you can be around the level of coach and player that you want to be or be at, I think the better opportunities and chances you'll have to crack in there. And then finally, just accepting, if D1's the dream and it doesn't happen, like not being too prideful, not to go to NAI Division II or Division III and figuring out a way to make that work, whether it's, taking out loans or academic money, whatever it may be. If that's the dream and that's the goal, I mean, it worked for me. I took out some loans. I had most of it paid for. I was really fortunate, but I would do it all over again because of the relationships that I was able to forge playing on all those teams. There's nothing better than playing on a college team and traveling. And Ty, those guys, after you're done with college, those are going to be your best friends.
Yeah.
High school guys, I still speak to quite a few of them, but the guys I'm closest to are the guys I played in college with. I'm in their weddings. They're in my wedding. I'm at their births of their kids. They're in businesses and talking to me about businesses and things like that. It's remarkable, and you don't know what opportunities you're going to have until you're able to get on one of those teams, Division I, Division II, NAI, D3. So whatever you need to do to make it happen starts with yourself most of the time. Make it happen.
Yeah. Go find the opportunity. Don't sit around thinking the opportunity is going to find you.
Yeah, a lot of times it won't. I was sitting back and thinking it was going to happen, and it didn't really happen like that. So go find the opportunity and break down those doors and create those opportunities for yourself.
All right, speed round coming into the tail end. Do this with all our guests.
I'm bad at this. I'm a little nervous, but let's do it.
It's all right. It's a quick one. But favorite athlete role model growing up?
Ooh, I'm gonna say Jerry Rice.
All right, that's my guy right there. I did so many book reports on him growing up. Never always thought I could practice catching a football with bricks, but I didn't really have any bricks hanging around like Jerry did.
He shook my hand, and back when they had training camp at University of the Pacific, I lived 3 blocks away.
Ooh, all right.
I was there as soon as my mom let me walk out of the house. I was there at 7 a.m. every day on my bike, waiting for those guys to leave outside the dorm or pull back in from wherever they were at. And shook my hand, J.J. Stokes, all those guys. But Jerry was kind of always the guy.
All right. Favorite moment ever in your sport that you experienced playing?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Favorite moment of my own.
And I'll give it. You can.
There wasn't very many, Ty, so this should be pretty easy.
It could be you playing. It could be you coaching. Whatever you want.
I have a lot coaching. I'm gonna do 2. Probably beating Oregon this year. They're number 8 in the country. That was pretty fun. Beating Washington was twice. That was really fun. Personally, probably had a game-winning catch. Pretty much as time expired in football against Puget Sound, we were down. It was like one of those fairy tale bomb moments where the guy just threw it as hard as he could, or as far as he could, and I kind of caught it in the back of the end zone.
So you were a wide receiver.
I started as a quarterback for 3 years and then moved to wide receiver for my last 2.
Hey, game-winning touchdown. It's a great feeling.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. Favorite professional sports moment you've got to watch in your lifetime, witness? Not in person. It could be on TV. Just anything.
Yeah, you know what? I was fortunate to be at a Broncos game with my wife when Peyton broke the touchdown record.
All right.
It was pretty special being at Mile High. People going nuts when he finally broke it.
That was a cool moment. Good old Peyton. My moment would have been this year, but it fell about 7 minutes short of a Super Bowl win for the 49ers.
Oh, yeah.
So it turned into the saddest moment of my
That was dreadful. My wife is a huge 49er fan. She used to cheer for them. She still does some stuff with them. I mean, she's not over it.
No, I'm not either. I think I've watched every Niner touchdown, 14 times over. I actually got to the point now where I'm not going to watch any more of last year's games. Just wait for the next season. But Mike Plink, I appreciate you taking time out of your day, talk to us about what it was like for you through the recruiting process and now as a coach at Washington State, and what people can expect or how they can find that opportunity as they're looking to get to that next level. So wishing you the best of luck in the next season, hoping that everything, gets to happen with everything that's going on and with COVID right now. But really looking forward to seeing high expectations for the the third top recruiting class in the Pac-12 and the 28th, right, in the nation.
Something like that.
Something like that. So on paper, high expectations, but looking forward to watching you guys and your future success.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, Ty. I appreciate the time. Let's do it again.
Thank you for listening to the Making an Athlete podcast. This podcast has been brought to you by our sponsor. Check us out at makinganathlete.com. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to catch our next episode.